Transgender issues are at the forefront today. I speak to a few individuals who have chosen to live as their authentic selves, transitioning at monumental but at very different times in each of their lives. I'm Rana Kamal. This is Our Issues, Twin Cities.
Me and my mom, we went to the craft store to make it look like a tiny room, and this lights up.
George is like any typical 13-year-old boy, but his road to authenticity was a journey. George is transgender. Do you remember back before you transitioned?
Yes, very well.
What was that like?
There was a lot of anger and confusion back then, because I was saying oh, I'm a boy, I'm a boy, I'm a boy, but everyone else was like, oh, that's so funny, blah blah blah, you're joking, or that's hilarious, and I would just be like, no, seriously, call me your other son, I'm a boy, I want a short haircut, and they were like, oh, that's so cute, and I was like, not really. So I was really angry at everyone because no one was listening to me, and I was upset because I wasn't how I felt anymore.
You know, that kid, he's so brave. He stands up in front of a crowd of people who are holding signs that say things that are really nasty about his community. And he talks from his heart, and he says, I'm just a kid, and I'm just like your kid. It's amazing to watch him do that. It's also terrifying.
When did you know he was transgender?
As long as I can remember that he could talk, way back to maybe 2 or 3 years old, he would literally say to us, no, I'm a boy. Or he'd say, stop it, call me son. I didn't understand. I thought he was a tomboy. We were absolutely okay with him not wearing dresses, and he liked to shop in the boys department, and all of that was perfectly fine. Short haircut, whatever, doesn't matter. I didn't understand he was transgender until we had a moment in 4th grade. Right before 4th grade, we were shopping for back to school, and he was begging me to buy these boys' underwear for him. And I was like, well, no one can see your underwear, so that's really personal. And he had been going through a lot of anger and depression and was in therapy, and so I mentioned it to his therapist. And the next week, the therapist presented me with the book, The Transgender Child, and I said, what? That's a thing? I didn't know. And I read the book, and oh my gosh, everything in this book sounds like my kid.
My mom came to me, and she gave me she gave me the information. She was like, oh, well, this is what transgender means. Could that apply to you? And I was like, oh, yeah. And she was just like, whoa, okay. So as soon as I heard it, I was like, oh, okay, like me.
He immediately said, so I can be George. And I'm thinking to myself, who's George? Never heard the name before, but it was within him. It was already in him.
At just the young age of 9, George transitioned to a boy.
Everyone thinks that once you transition, it's okay, overnight you're just suddenly you're suddenly a boy, but it was really slow. It took a couple years, and it was hard for me to get what I needed. So I got blockers, which just stops puberty pretty much.
How did you know that it was the right decision at such a young age?
I didn't really care what other people thought of me. I was so angry and confused, and people were finally listening to me and being okay, this is a real thing. This isn't just him trying to be cute. I got so much confidence and courage, and I just went for it. I was like, okay, this is what I'm doing now. Don't use pronouns. And when I switched to using he, him pronouns, I was like, okay, I will correct you. I'm not afraid to correct you. I will be actually it's he, or actually it's George.
He transitioned at 9. Were you worried that he was making such a big decision at such a young age?
Yeah, of course. Who wouldn't? But the thing is, when a kid is that insistent and is telling you, and had been telling you for so long, and when you're consulting with therapists and when you're consulting with other parents, you feel less alone and it's less scary. You can either support your child through this journey, or you can deny what's happening with your child and risk your child's well-being and your relationship with your child.
Today, George is an 8th grader at Avalon School, where being transgender is not a rarity.
George is somebody who understands what I'm going through, and in a way that none of my friends can.
Andrew is George's boyfriend. He also identifies as transgender, transitioning after puberty.
Both the emotional part of it was difficult as well as the physical part of it. Because unfortunately I was too old to go on blockers, so like you said, after puberty I had already had a female figure, so I had to take testosterone, and really especially most of my female figure won't be able to go away from that, and it will require surgery, which is very difficult, especially on my family.
When did you know that you were transgender?
Ever since I was about 3, I was able to say, well, I'm not a girl. I see these girls in their dresses and playing with dolls in school, and I knew that in my head that wasn't me. I didn't know what I was, but I knew that that was not who I was.
Danni, who is a senior at Avalon, identifies as non-binary, neither a male or female.
I remember on the first day of kindergarten, they asked children to line up in single file lines of boys and girls, and I felt confused not only about where I should go and which line I fit into, but also why we felt the need to line up in separate groups in the first place. I came out at the age of 12. I was researching for a project on feminism, and while doing my research, I stumbled upon the term non-binary. And when I hear about other trans people's stories, I hear about questioning and being unsure and spending months trying to figure out if this was really who they are. That wasn't the case for me. The moment I saw the word non-binary, I thought, oh, there you go. That's how I've felt for my entire life. The pronouns that I use are they and them, because they sort of suggest a neutral gender and a more neutral style of presentation. However, occasionally I have times where I feel as if I lean towards the more masculine end of the spectrum. And at those times, I also enjoy being referred to by he and him pronouns.
Why is that?
Being partially male is something that's only come up for me very recently in my gender journey, and thus is something that I'm still currently working out and questioning. And I think that goes to show that even though I've been out as trans for a long time, and even though I've been sure about being trans for a long time, people still go through changes in their lives. And I still have to learn how to navigate those changes.
What does it feel like to be walking through the halls of this school as your authentic self, as George?
It's amazing, because at my old school, like, people would just come out and they'd be like, what are you doing here? Like, birth name, and I would be like, whoa. But here, like, my first year here, I was just expecting someone to come out somewhere and just be like, whoa, man, like, trans person, and that never happened. Like, it still hasn't happened.
When we return, a woman's journey transitioning at a pivotal time in her adulthood.
Everybody else gets to be who they are, so why shouldn't I, right?
Jackie's transition story begins at 30.
You're a trans woman, you kind of grew up from the guy's standpoint, and all of a sudden you're 30 and you're moving over. You have to try to learn that.
Born a male, Jackie knew she was a female at a young age. As a boy, when did you realize that something wasn't right?
I was very young, probably kindergarten. You go to school, so there's a boys' line and a girls' line, right? And I got in the wrong one. And so they corrected it, and so there it starts, I pretty much kept it to myself, and, we're talking in the 70s now. So there was no internet, there were no books on it. The word transgender didn't even exist yet.
So she suppressed her feelings, became uber masculine, joined the Navy, and got married.
I kind of thought I'd grow out of it. I guess I was kind of hoping. It would have been easier, but it didn't happen. And so I went through the stage of where you try to go hyper masculine. Joined the Navy, did a lot of weightlifting and all that kinds of stuff. Had my mustache and did all that.
When did you come out?
1995.
Okay.
And I didn't know what I was going to do. That's when, that winter, I had a cabin up north that I was selling, so I went up there and I was going to kill myself, and I didn't. So when I came back, I was living in Menominee, Wisconsin, and I was like, well, I'm never going through that again. So I'm going to have to figure out how to make this work. And I had found the address for the program in human sexuality over here at the University of Minnesota. And I wrote Walter Bachting, it was a big letter, and then my journey to me began.
When did you come out then to your family and friends? How were they? Were they supportive?
Not really. Everyone freaks out. Total shock, right? And you need help and all that kinds of stuff. And at first, they thought I was going to the therapist. So well, that's good. Yeah, do that. But then once they find you're going to transition, and it got worse for a while. Now things are better.
Soon after, Jackie began her transition into a woman. You transitioned in 1996. What was that like? What was that process like?
First time, you have no idea what you're getting yourself into. Well, for me, it was my first time of two. And, part of it, you're just very excited. You're finally going to be yourself. Finally, after all these years, it's going to be the greatest thing in the world. People warn you, but you don't think people could be as mean as they are. So you think it's going to be great, and then you transition, and then you find out how nice people aren't. It's a battle. Some people are okay with it, some aren't, but life is totally different once you transition. The relationships you used to have, you don't have anymore with people like at work. They just all kind of go away, You have very few friends after that.
After only 4 years of living as a woman, Jackie detransitioned because of the discrimination she faced and the toll it left on her family and career.
I was working at the University of Minnesota and just couldn't get promoted there. Things weren't going well, and my daughter was having problems. She was very depressed. Her mother wasn't supportive of my transition. So negative thoughts to my daughter, and she'd call me crying, no. So I was like, I at least, if my career's going nowhere, I at least have to take care of my daughter first, and then because that's my responsibility, and then I'll have to worry about this later when she grows up. So that's exactly what I did. 2000, I detransitioned and met my partner that I've been with for 16 years. I met him the day I cut my hair.
For the next 9 years, Jackie went back to living as a male. In 2009, she transitioned back to a female for the second time. Today, the golf course is where Jackie and her friends come weekly. She used to come as a male and continued to visit the same golf course after her transition.
At first it's a little awkward, because I was playing in the men's club, so it was all guys. And then also, Jackie's playing with the guys, but this is my sport. I love to do it, and at the time before my surgery, that's the only way you can really still compete, because it's just the only way it's fair, right? So you just have to get over yourself and do what you enjoy doing.
So what was it like when you came here after you transitioned? Was everyone fairly supportive?
Yeah, it was very. I had a couple of people come up, shake my hand the first day, congratulations, and I was just totally blown away. It was that was kind of the nicest thing when someone did that. I was just shocked. It was great.
What was it like stepping back into society as your authentic self?
It's a little different the second time because you know what you're up against. I hadn't had my surgery or anything, so for that I had to go back through all the therapy and stuff. Kind of pick up where I left off, but kind of back into it again after all those years. And so it's kind of different. You get into a group therapy situation, you realize, the trans women who've never really been out there, the blinders are on because you just don't know any better, and then you've been out there, and it's like, you know what it's going to be like. Being yourself, there's nothing better, even if it's tough.
And even through the tough moments, Jackie says life today is pretty good living as her true identity. Do you feel like when you transitioned that people thought you were just going to become a whole different person?
I think people don't understand that you're still going to be you, Maybe, like for me, it's a more feminine me that I couldn't show people, but
deep down I'm still the same person.
Up next on Our Issues Twin Cities, fighting discrimination against transgender people through the support of the community. Through the years, the trans community has been subjected to hate crimes and fatal violence. Last year, 21 transgender lives were murdered, reaching a historic high in the U.S.
One day a year, we basically sit down and remember all the trans people who were murdered in the last year. And so you have to worry about that because, people might date you, but you don't know if they want to harm you, or they might want to date you, but they're not okay with it, so they might harm you afterwards. So you have to worry about all this. So all that comes front and center after you transition. I was mugged one time in a parking lot by a couple drunks who were going to get mouthy. And
for many trans people, fighting discrimination can be a daily battle. After George transitioned at 9, were you worried about him facing discrimination, hatred, bullying?
Absolutely. It's amazing how much privilege you realize you carry when you suddenly take some of it away. And George still is a really privileged kid. I mean, he carries a lot of privilege with him, but he's also part of a marginalized community. And it was the day he transitioned at school was terrifying for me.
On the bus was really hard because every time I got off the bus after school, they'd be like, oh, okay, bye, birth name, or bye, girl. And I was like, I came out this year, like this is the year where I was like, yes, I'm comfortable. And just this group of kids would like attack me with this stuff. And I got so tired with it. I just came home one day and I was just crying and I was like, Mom, this is what's happening. Like, I can't do it anymore. So she called the school and we got that cleared up.
Going to school was even more difficult after I'd come out, and there were certain parts of my life that I had to abandon because the people involved wouldn't be able to support me. I sort of had to miss out on being involved in sports after I came out because the world of sports is a heavily gendered one. But coming out and facing those struggles has also realized who the true friends in my life are, or who the people are who really do want to support me. And now that I'm surrounded by a really supportive community, I don't have to deal with that nearly as much anymore.
By coming together as a community, Transforming Families provides support for transgender people and their loved ones.
It was a life-saving organization for us. It's a peer-led support group for kids and young adults who are gender questioning, transgender, non-binary, and then their family, however that kid defines family. So it doesn't have to be mom and dad. It can be, we have grandparents, we have friends, we have siblings. Everyone's welcome at Transforming Families. And what we do is we talk and we socialize and we form a community and we support each other. And kids get to meet other kids who are just like them, and they don't have to explain themselves to anybody, and they can just play. Teens can meet other teens who are just like them, and they can hang out and socialize and form friendships.
In the beginning of my transition, Transforming Families was everything because that was a place where I could go and I could meet other trans kids and actually talk about my experience and be like, this is what I'm going through right now. What are you going through? And I was in the teen group since I was 11. So I was talking to these older people and what they were going through, so then I could look forward to something. Be like, okay, I'm looking forward to starting blockers, or I'm looking forward to starting T or testosterone, and I'm looking forward to all these different things, and like you're helping me through this.
Parents meet other parents who have been on this journey before. A parent will walk in unsure about what to do with their kid, unsure about this journey that they're on. We see a lot of parents cry through their first meeting. And then they start hearing about other kids and other families, and they talk to other parents, and they don't feel so alone anymore.
The Twin Cities has been a pillar for transgender people, noted for being one of the LGBT-friendliest cities. In fact, Minnesota is one of the top-ranking states for transgender rights. Last year, the Minnesota State High School League voted to allow all female-identified students to play on girls' sports teams in the state.
Twin Cities, I mean, as a whole, is probably as good as it can get. You know, we're all watching this election front and center, and we see, you know, not everybody is totally okay with equal rights. I mean, across the board, not just transgender or LGBT people, people of color, people who are Muslim, and hatred's really out there right now. And but the Twin Cities itself is great. I mean, as good as it's gonna get.
I mean, the first year I was here, I was expecting like someone to come out of somewhere and yell at me for being trans.
For George, attending a school that accepts and supports transgender youth is immensely instrumental in his trans journey. How has your experience here been different than your old school?
It's been really different because like here all of the bathrooms are gender neutral, like all of them, and that's a genderbread person.
Okay.
So like there's just, it's so different because like this school is like built for people who are part of the LGBT community, where they can feel comfortable and they can be open about who they are, really. And my old school was just kind of trying to shut that out. So just like they had the little stickers on the door saying this was an LGBT safe space, but every time I tried to go in there, they'd be like, get to class, and I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
So it was weird because nothing was really like meant for LGBT people. It's like we didn't exist.
If I could speak to the nation and say, I would say, I have a heart, I have lungs, and I have a brain. I am just like you. All that is different about me is that I am not my body. I'm human, and I am just like you, and there's no reason for you to think that I'm different, because I'm just a human.
I just want people to know that like I'm here, like we do exist, like I'm visible, like I'm here, I'm trans. This isn't a phase, like you can come back when I'm 40 and I'll be like, yeah, I'm trans. Like this isn't gonna change anytime soon or ever, hopefully, because I'm proud of my community.
For more information, please go to transformingfamilies.org. Thank you for joining me this week on Our Issues Twin Cities. I'm Brenda Kamal. See you next time.